Silvia, let's take a look at your new set of essays. We've got traditional foods replaced by fast food. Let's see what you wrote. Experts throughout the world have debated whether the replacement of traditional foods by fast foods has a negative impact or not. Some believe that this replacement can be harmful to both families and individuals. Personally, I strongly agree. This essay will argue this using examples from the UK government to demonstrate points and prove arguments. Okay, this is lovely. It's really very good. Remember that you are also supposed to talk about society, not just families and individuals. Perhaps you mention it elsewhere, but it's always a good idea to mention what you're going to talk about in your introduction. Other than that, it was lovely. On the one hand, there is ample evidence demonstrating the impact of fast food has had throughout our society. The central reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, the increasing amount of time people spend working makes fast food the best ally for those with little time to cook. Secondly, it is also known that, while quick and useful, fast food is considerably less healthy. For example, the recent empirical research by the UK government demonstrated that 70% of the population ate fast food for dinner at least 3 times a week, which was also proved detrimental for their health as their amounts of fats and cholesterol is elevated. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that even if fast food can be useful, it also has disadvantages. Okay, I'm a little confused about this. I'm a little confused about the way you organize this paragraph. Because you're talking about society, which is what I told you a little earlier. I was confused. I was worried about that you weren't going to mention it. And here you did. But I'm confused by the fact that you decided to argue both positives and negatives of fast food's effect in this one paragraph. I'm not really convinced that that was such a great idea. You maybe should have decided to focus just on one side rather than both. So let's just put like a pause here. Let's put a parenthesis here. We'll come back to it after we look at your next paragraph and see what you said here. On the other hand, although there is a case for fast food benefiting the population, the impact of traditional foods cannot be overstated. This is largely because traditional cooking is healthier and richer in variety and taste. Consistent with this line of thinking is that traditional foods are the method families use to spend their time together. For example, if a family member cooks dinner, then everyone can sit together and enjoy it. But if each one visits a fast food restaurant instead, this interaction does not happen. It has been proven through a study by the UK government that families that attempt to maintain homemade traditional food in their diet spend more time together. Thus, it is possible to state beyond doubt that traditional foods enhance family interactions. Okay, now we're really going to talk about this. Let me just get through your conclusion, and then we'll talk about what happened here with task achievement. From the arguments and examples given, I firmly believe that even if fast food has its benefits, traditional food should not be left aside and should be fomented. It is predicted that, taking this into account, traditional cuisine will increasingly grow in importance. Okay, so here's the great news about this, Silvia. The grammar, the vocabulary, all the language you used is really, really very good. It's so accurate. It's very natural. So it was very easy to get through this, to read it. I didn't have to stop or hesitate or anything. You could see I corrected very little in terms of grammar and vocabulary. But we really do have to talk about your development of this, your task achievement, what you talked about, and how you talked about it, because these create something of a problem. Now, I'm going to ask you to refresh my memory what score you need. Um, it's not that this is off topic, so this wouldn't really put you in one of those very low categories for task achievement, but you did argue, or rather develop, some of the wrong elements of this essay, which would essentially keep you from getting into one of those higher band scores. Okay, so let's talk about what happened, what you were supposed to do here, what you were supposed to focus on, and what you ended up focusing on. So the first sentence is your given. It's the situation. All right. And they're taking it for granted that fast food is overtaking traditional food. Then the hypothesis that they're working on is this, that this shift, this trend away from traditional food towards fast food, this is a negative shift. Okay. Then they're asking you if you agree with that. Is it a negative shift, this change from traditional food to fast food? That's what you have to argue. And then not only that, but is it negative towards these specific elements? Okay. So you said that you agree. So since you said that you strongly agree, all right, and this is a to what extent do you agree or disagree essay, there is absolutely no reason to argue the benefits of fast food. It just doesn't make sense. If this was a discuss advantages and disadvantages essays, then yes, it would make sense. But since they're asking to what extent do you agree, and you've told us that you strongly agree that this is negative, there's really no reason at all for you to discuss the positive aspects of fast food. Okay, so anything regarding that would be irrelevant. If you wanted to argue both sides and if you wanted to talk about the positives of fast food as well as the positives of traditional foods, you could have done that. There are ways to do this, and those ways begin with your introduction. So rather than saying, personally, I strongly agree, you could have said something else. You could have said that, um, personally, I believe that while fast food is positive for sustenance and working people who have little time, on the whole, I believe this trend is negative. Okay, so if you had said that, if you had kind of alerted your reader to the fact that you did see some positives to fast food, then your decision to include positives of fast food would have made sense. But you do have to account for that in your introduction. Okay, so that's the first thing. So then the next question is, well, how much did you actually talk about families, individuals, and society? So here you mentioned the word society, but really, what are you saying in terms of the positive or negative um, impact for society? So you're talking about people who don't have time to cook, okay, and then you talk about it being less healthy, so that it's bad for their health. So this didn't really feel like society. In other words, it doesn't have an effect on the whole. It really kind of sounds like you were talking about the individual and not society. So even though you use the word society, you didn't really talk about how this affects people as like a unit, people. Okay. So then here you talked about families and that they don't spend time cooking. So that's fine. But then that's it. So I see this basically being about families and I see this being about the individual and not really society. So let me tell you how I think you could have done this. There are actually several ways. One way that you could do this is saying that, for example, it has positive effects for the individual, but on the whole, it's negative for the family and for society. So you could have done it like that. Or again, you could have said that it's positive for society, but it's a negative for the individual and the family. So that's another way you could organize this. Alternatively, you could spend a paragraph talking about how it's negative for the family, how it's negative for the individual, and then a paragraph for the negatives for society. So, in other words, you could do it like kind of half and half, like pick two of the elements, combine them, and then talk about the other one here, whether you focus on two positives and one negative, or two negatives and one positive, or all of one, but doing it like that. And then, of course, the thing is that when you're talking about family, individual, and society, you also make a comparison to traditional food. So we're talking about a shift towards fast food, okay? The negatives of this, and then you want to make some sort of a reference to traditional food and how this is not the case with traditional food, or this is something that is lost in this shift away from traditional food towards fast food. I don't know if that makes sense, but in other words, talk about one side, the negative, the positive, whatever it is, but then in terms of individuals, families, and society, but then make some comparisons with fast food, with traditional food in there. I hope that made sense. It's a lot of information. Essentially, you're dealing with a lot of things you have to talk about. You have to talk about three different levels, and you have to talk about primarily this trend towards fast food, but then by making some comparisons here and there to traditional food and how they differ and how just kind of highlighting how negative fast food is. All right, so let's move on. We have your shoe sales graph. So let's see what you wrote. This bar chart shows the sales of two different leather shoe types in 9 European countries during 2018. It is clear that some countries preferred one specific item over the other. France, Germany, and Poland showcase an evident preference for brown leather shoes with this, and this sales respectively, whereas Belgium barely sold any of them, having black shoes reaching over 100,000 sales. Interesting organization. Let's see what you said in the following paragraphs. The other countries displayed a very similar amount of sales when comparing both shoe types, with only around 1/4 of the overall sales differing. Some of them, such as the UK, Hungary, and Italy, sold a slightly larger number of black shoes, whereas Ireland and Holland sold a higher quantity of the brown option. Overall, each country portrayed different color preferences when buying leather shoes, some of them stating an indisputable difference, while others maintained significant similarity amongst them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. There were a few things that were a little surprising to me. First of all, the grammar was good, the vocabulary was good, all that was well controlled, so I'm not concerned really about any of that. What I am concerned about, though, is your task achievement as well as your coherence and cohesion. I'm concerned about coherence and cohesion because I don't really 100% agree with the way you organized your ideas. That's one thing. But then, as far as task achievement is concerned, I feel like you're really missing a lot of information here. And I'll tell you what that information is. And so, unfortunately, these two things, coherence and cohesion and task achievement, it's going to lower your score. So, let's talk about what I mean. First of all, you really had very little data. When I mean data, I mean the numbers in this chart. You had 18 pieces of data to talk about. You only referred to 4. That's just not enough. Okay. If you had included no data, then that really would have dropped your score down. But even having this few, we're missing lots of pieces of this puzzle. We only have 3 pieces of information for brown, and we have 1 piece of information for black leather shoes. It's just not enough. Okay, so that's something you have to keep in mind. There's no real set number which says how many pieces of information you need to include and how many not. But I can definitely tell you that this is just too low. So that's the first thing. All right, so now let's talk about the actual paragraphs themselves and what you included and how you kind of organized them. So here it was just a general of like the preference. I really did not understand why you selected these particular countries, France, Germany, and Poland. Because look, you've got France here, which is kind of like in the middle of the road. Germany, okay. And then Poland, I mean, sure, Poland had the most brown leather shoes, but you never highlighted that. Okay. And Germany had the same number of shoes, of brown leather shoes, as Hungary. So I don't know why you selected Germany, not Hungary. And more interestingly, Hungary had the highest number of black leather shoes. So the data you selected was actually really rather strange to me. And then here you started talking about brown leather shoes, and then you switched and you started talking about black leather shoes. And then here, I really didn't know what this was happening. I didn't know what was happening here. And so I also thought your overview was a little vague. You said that they portrayed different color preferences, but that's just not enough in a graph like this. So you essentially need to tell us something a little more specific. So you could have said something like color preferences differed. However, Hungary sold the most black leather shoes, and I don't know. Belgium sold the most. No, wait. Let me try it differently. So you could have said that the highest shoes sold were black leather in Hungary and the least were brown in Belgium. Or you could have said the most black leather shoes sold were in Hungary, whereas brown leather shoes were most sold in Poland. So something like that, focusing on the highs of each color, or focusing on the high of like in general and the low in general, that would have been okay. But what you had was a little too general. So let me tell you how I would have organized this. There's not just one way to do this chart, of course. There are a million ways to do it, but there is one way that I personally would do it. And just so that you know, when examiners get the test, because they give it to us, we are actually advised to kind of plot out how we would answer this and how we think, what we think would be the best way to organize this task one. And so I too have a suggestion on how I think this could be really well done. So let me tell you how I would organize it. First, I would do my introduction as you did. Then I would do my overview because I always put my overview second. It doesn't change your score, but there are certain strategic reasons why I always put my overview right after the introduction. I'm happy to tell you about it some other time. And then I would start off a paragraph about black leather shoes. Why black? Because it's the highest figure in your chart. So pay attention to it. And it's important to signpost these things. So I would have started with something like, let's see. Oh, yeah. I would also use these numbers along the side. They're there to help you. So use them. They make organizing and categorizing much easier. So what I would say would be something like this. Regarding black leather shoes, 3 countries sold above 100,000. More specifically, Hungary sold the most at 140,000 black leather shoes, followed closely by Italy, whereas Belgium sold just over 100,000. In contrast, the fewest black leather shoes sold were in France at roughly 35,000. The remaining countries, UK, Germany, Ireland, Holland, and Poland, all sold between 50 and 100,000 shoes, black leather shoes. You're done. You're done with that paragraph. That's it. 3 sentences, essentially 4. Then you do something very similar with brown leather shoes. So you could say, regarding brown leather shoes, 4 countries sold over 100,000. Poland sold 135,000. Italy sold just above 100,000, and Germany and Hungary sold roughly the same amount between yeah, I guess you could give the number at 30, 130, whatever that is, okay? Then the lowest number of any shoes sold was recorded in Belgium at 5,000 brown leather shoes. The remaining countries, you don't have to name them again because you've already named them, all sold between, and you can be more specific here, 75 and 100,000 brown leather shoes. That's it. You're done. You've included everything. We know the names of all the countries. We've signposted, you've emphasized those highs, you've emphasized those lows, and then you just kind of smush together the middle because we really don't care about those numbers anyway. Okay? So that's how I would do this. And it should be around 180 words or so. I never actually mapped it out, but if you did it properly, it should be. Okay? So I hope that information is helpful. I hope it gives you a suggestion on how you can do this. So in something like this, emphasize the highs, emphasize the lows. I call them the outliers. So emphasize those, smush together the middle ones, and that's it. Okay? So go ahead, correct these, and let's see another set from you. Good luck.